I'm General Robert Oakes, and I spent 35 years in the United States Air Force. And then I spent several years following my retirement from the Air Force as a general authority, a member of the 2nd Quorum of 70. And for part of that period, I was one of the 7 presidents of the 70. I grew up in Provo, Utah, born in Los Angeles, California. Grew up in Provo, went to BY High School there, graduated, spent 1 year at Brigham Young University, and then 4 years at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Graduated there and went to pilot training. And following pilot training, I was selected to fly fighters and went to fighter training. I had a strong testimony of the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ in these latter days when I went to the academy as a cadet. And I went there, and while I was there at one time, I served as a stake missionary for 2 years, and we baptized 9 or 10 people in that time. So when they called me to do something, I did it. And so I went with the testimony, and it was strengthened. I found that my work in the church helped my work in the military. I'll give you an example. This is one of my favorite stories. People ask, and the question you just asked, and I tell this story because it was such a proof to me that as we do our church calling, fulfill our church callings, magnify our church callings, we increase our ability to serve. And we went out on an overnight camp out south of Phoenix, and camped out in the desert. And when I got up in the morning, I looked out, and there was a range of mountains out there. And they were a very unique range of mountains. And I looked at the map, excuse me, and they were labeled as the Eagle Tail Mountains. And they just stood up like eagle tails. They were aptly named. And I looked at them, and I said, that's interesting. And they made an impression on me. About a week later, I was flying a check ride in the F-100, and it was a low-level navigation check ride. And I would get in the back seat of a 2-seated F-100, pull a hood, and we would take off, and I was just looking at instruments. It was instruments only. And I didn't have any GPS or any way of knowing where I was, so I just had planned where I should be, and then I flew the course, and I assumed that's where I was. And so I flew the course, and then you let down under the hood to 2,000 feet above the ground, and then the instructor pilot would say, okay, come out from under the hood, your aircraft. And you'd come out from under the hood, and you'd look around trying to identify, were you on course? Were you where you were supposed to be, you had planned to be? And I came around, and nothing was familiar. And I knew I was lost. Something had gone badly wrong. I had an instrument failure or something. Then I looked over, and I saw the Eagle Tail Mountains. From my week before, I recognized the Eagle Tail Mountains. So I looked at my map, and I said, there's the Eagle Tail Mountains, but they're over here. And so I must be over here. My course line is over here. So I popped over the Eagle Tail Mountains, got on course, saw some checkpoints that I recognized, and I got on course, found my target, dropped my bomb, good bomb. And so I passed the ride. I passed that ride because I'd taken my scout troop, or my deacon's quorum, out on an overnight camp out. I mean, it's just so obvious, so simple, that the Lord had taken care of me and blessed me richly. This was a very important check ride. If I fail it, I don't know where I'd be now. But I didn't fail it. I passed it, and so So and I've got a lot of stories like that, where the Lord blessed me for doing my church calling in my military life. And He does, and it's not just me, obviously. He blesses people when we magnify our calling and do our best at it.